Today we're going to talk about Daniel, which is one of my favorite books and one of my favorite characters in the whole Hebrew Bible. Daniel's super cool. First off, his name is epic, Daniel. I have so many of my Hebrew students whose name is Daniel, and anytime that I have a student in my Hebrew class, if they have a name that's a Hebrew name, guess what? They are being called by their Hebrew version instead of their English. And Daniel is very common, and for good reason. First off, it just sounds cool, but also it has a great meaning. Daniel, Dan is judge, E is my, and El is God. So God is my judge. And many times when you're reading the Hebrew Bible, something that is really interesting to notice is oftentimes the meaning of a character's name is somehow connected to their story or to the plot or maybe just some side nuanced point that's really interesting. And what are the chances that this would happen so many times? Anyway, Daniel is one of the best examples of how this works because when you think about it, almost every challenge that Daniel faces, even from chapter 1, is an issue about who is judge. Who is it that Daniel will obey? Who is it that Daniel will follow? So, for example, whenever he's presented the food that would defile him to eat, you have the situation. Daniel's in exile. What sort of rules and standards is he going to follow? Who is the judge of his life? Is it King Nebuchadnezzar and his standards, or is it God? Same is true later in his life when we have the famous episode about who is he going to pray to. Even though there's a law that says now you must pray to the king, Daniel says that he just determines in himself that he's still going to pray to the one true God. So Daniel's name is significant not just because his name is a cool Hebrew name, but it's significant because it is directly connected to the plot of his life. So all that is really important setup for something I want to show you today. And whenever you're reading a chapter of the Hebrew Bible, in most Bibles now, they will have headings and subheadings. So, for example, let's look at this. We have Daniel. We have the name of the book. Then we also have the subheading, Daniel taken to Babylon. So this part is not in the original of the Hebrew or even the ancient translations. They're putting this heading in because they want us to see an idea of what's going on. It can make it easier to skim through sections to know what's going on. So let's see where the next one is. So the next one is Daniel's faithfulness. So you have the first section being Daniel 1, verse 1 through Daniel 1, verse 7. And this is a really common subdivision to make in most translations. And as we're going to see today, this is a very unfortunate place to start a new subsection because it makes your mind think we have a new story going on. Let's dive in and see what's going on here. I also want to go ahead and show you, as I enjoy doing many times, I want to show you this story from the Leningrad Codex, which is the most ancient, complete Hebrew Bible that we have. Okay, so I have Daniel chapter 1 pulled up from the Leningrad Codex, and I'll be able to make some notes for us as we go along. Here's where the story begins. You have Daniel and some of his friends are taken into exile because King Nebuchadnezzar has sieged the city, and some of the elite class is taken, and some of these younger people who have this royal bloodline are being taken back, and those who have certain quality traits are going to be trained to serve directly for King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel and his 3 friends, there's some of that group. Now, the point I want to look at today is specifically the story that involves the changing of their names, because once they are exiled, we see that there are people who have certain quality traits they're taken in, and they're going to be trained. And we have that the king is assigning them a daily portion of the food. A number of things happening here. They're going to be educated for 3 years. What we're going to look at is verses 6 through 8. And what's unfortunate is that these are divided, but they really shouldn't. Here's what we have. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. So let's look at this verse in Hebrew. They have some really cool Hebrew names. So we have Mi B'nai Yehuda, so of the sons of Judah, or the tribes of Judah, fine. We have Daniel, which I already told you means God. My God is, or God is my judge. Hananya, which means something like the Lord has been gracious. Mishael. This one's a little bit more difficult. Mi is who, and El is God. The Sha, it could be related to the word she, which is a relative pronoun in later Hebrew. So one interesting option that some scholars have proposed is that it could mean who is what God is. Okay? And then we have Azariah. Azariah means the Lord has helped, or the Lord helped. Really great Hebrew names. And what's going to happen is their names are going to be changed. Now, why would this happen? So I'm going to use a cool resource that I highly recommend for any of you who want to get more into the ancient Near Eastern culture of the Hebrew Bible. It is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. And it covers I have the version that covers the entire Old Testament. What's cool about this is it's a great one-stop shop to just get introduced to elements of ancient Near Eastern culture, history, and language that are relevant specifically for portions of the Bible. So you can go to any verse or any chapter, and they'll have at least something to say. So not every verse will be covered, but it's a really good, accessible set of volumes where as you're reading through the Bible, you can go in and check out what they have to say. So I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the insight they give into this chapter. Okay, so I'm going to show you the part in Daniel. This part was done by scholar Ernest Lucas. I'm going to show you a comment that's made on the names. Here's what they show for Daniel 1, verse 7, with new names, where we actually have a few different stories of when Nebuchadnezzar, as well as a leader in Egypt, both of them in the book of 2 Kings, there are stories where a name is changed. So we see in 2 Kings 24, verse 17, Vayamlech melech Bavel et Matanya dodo tachtav vayasef et shmo Tzidkiyahu. So his name, we have Matanya. His name was changed to Tzidkiyahu. And then in, 23, verse 34, we have a Pharaoh changing a name. What does he do? Vayamlech paro necho et Eliakim ben Yoshiyahu tachat Yoshiyahu aviv vayasev et shmo Yehoyakim. It makes an interesting note here. Both these different verses, we have the new names become Hebrew names. Okay, so we're going to come back to that in a minute. So the main point we need to know is this. Changing someone's name was one way in which a conqueror expressed his authority. Okay, so it's maybe a little bit like, hey, I own you. Okay, this is what you're going to be called now, and I'm going to change the way that you're called, and that shows my authority over you. So let's go back to Daniel now. And a couple of things I want you guys to note here is, first off, in this story, one of the thing that you're going to notice first is that these young men, their names are not changed to Hebrew names. In fact, their names are changed to something completely different. That he changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, and Hananiah he changed his name to Shadrach, and Mishael changed his name to Meshach, and Azariah changed to Aved-Nego. We don't know exactly what all of these names mean, because some names aren't as direct and clear. You have to do a little more work with the Hebrew root as well as other things. Some of them are more direct. Some scholars think that these aren't the exact names their names were changed to because the author of the book didn't want their corrupted names to be presented in the fully corrupted version to make that more of a focus. Either way, giving you one example that most scholars are pretty clear on, though, is Abednego, which is Aved-Nego, which looks kind of like the Hebrew phrase for slave of Nego, and Nego being one of the Mesopotamian deities. So his name is being changed from the Lord has helped to a slave of Nego. And this is much more intense than the other name changes. The other name changes that we see from Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh, the meanings of their names aren't bad. They're just changing them. Whereas these, the meaning, it's completely changing, if you will, what their identity is. Instead of their name being connected to the Lord, to the one true God, now their names are being connected potentially to Mesopotamian deities, or maybe some of the other names aren't connected so much to deities, but it's completely integrating them into the Babylonian, Mesopotamian culture and stripping them of that. So why is this so significant? Did Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian leadership, did they just really not like the sounds that Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, are those sounds just annoying to them? No, I think this is really, they're trying to completely change what their identity is. And this might sound a little bit foreign, I guess, for us, because when we think about the meaning of someone's name, like maybe your name or my name, your parent may have put some thought into at the beginning, but the meaning of your name isn't explicitly clear. So it's just a good reminder that many times in Hebrew, when someone's name means something, it's not like a hidden meaning. It's a very clear meaning, and which means you don't have to explain it to someone. It's kind of like if someone's name is Hope or Faith or Hunter. You know exactly what their name is. That's how these Hebrew names are working. So I want to show you what's significant here. First is when Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar do name changes, the verb there is vayasev. Okay, that's the word for to change. But here we have a different word, vayasem. And vayasem literally means, and he put. So we have at the beginning of verse 7, vayasem lahem, and he put to them, or he put on them, you could maybe say. The chief of the eunuchs put on them names. And he put to Daniel Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abed-nego. And so he's putting on them names. I find that specific Hebrew verb that's not used in the other stories is kind of interesting because you can feel, it makes it more picturesque. He's putting on them this new identity. And for us, we're seeing this is a bad thing. It feels like it's a weight is being put on them. A shroud is being put on them. This is not, this is just striking at the core of who they are, and something different is being put on them that they don't want. So now you're at this point in the story, and in English, if you look on this side here, you see now we have a new subheading. Okay, so they had new name changes. Let's go on to the next story. Okay. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. So it sounds like, okay, we're on a new story now. Now, if you're reading English, you would see the word but. And you think, wait a second, why would you start a new section with the word but? Isn't that connected to the previous part? Well, that's indeed true. And we're going to see why these sections are actually connected for some pretty meaningful reasons. So the first thing is this. Verse 7, Vayasem, and he put on them. Vayasem, and he put on them names. Now look how verse 8 begins. Vayasem, it's an exact same verb. So in English, what you see, the word for resolved is actually the same word Hebrew, and he put. So why are English translators doing this? Let me read this in Hebrew for you. Vayasem Daniel al libo, asher lo yitga'al befatbag hamelech. Okay, so we have the first word, and he put, who's the one who put? Daniel did the putting. Al, on his heart. Okay, so Daniel put on his heart. Let's look on accordance now. So we see Vayasem Daniel, and Daniel put on his heart. And remember, heart in Hebrew can also be mind. Okay, so he put on himself. Okay, put on his heart, he put on his mind, that he would not defile himself. Okay, so this word resolved is to put on your heart. So this is what's really cool, is this is clearly connected. These verses here, they're clearly being linked by the Hebrew word vayasem, vayasem, vayasem. And it's all these three back to back to back. Now, what's also interesting to me is this. Look, we just learned that Daniel's name has changed. So why is Daniel not called Belteshazzar here? I think the author is trying to point you out that even though Daniel's name is technically changed, Daniel doesn't see his identity as being changed. And so Daniel's thinking to himself, you can change the sounds that come out of your mouth when you address me, but God is still my judge. I am still Daniel. And of course, that's what the story is about. But Daniel resolved in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's food. And so this fits directly into his identity. And so if you follow all the stories of Daniel, this is what is emphasized. So important to note, there are some stories in the book of Daniel where Daniel is referred to as Belteshazzar. And personally, I don't think we should read into that as being Daniel is going back and forth and wavering in his identity. I say that because really there's no story in Daniel where that seems to make sense narratively. But here, I think in chapter 1, it's very clear what the author is trying to show you. And so, in other words, we need to take out this subsection heading difference. I think it does more harm than it does good. And I think Some of your English Bibles, hopefully they have a good footnote at the bottom that explains the connection going on here, that we see the flow from the name change. And so we see Daniel's saying, my identity is still that God is my judge. That is who I am. That's my identity. So this is a really inspiring story to me. I think it's really cool. But if we don't understand Hebrew, if we don't understand the ancient Near East, we don't realize how significant this story is. So to summarize, the things you may not have realized is that Daniel and his friends, their names are all Hebrew names that are connected to God or to the Lord. They all end with El or Yah. And then all their names have God and Lord being taken out of them. They're not there anymore. So that is, first off, irregular from other biblical stories where names are changed. Second thing is a different verb is used for the name change. It's not vayasev, it's vayasim, different word. And this one is to put on. So I think it's emphasizing this, trying to put on them a new identity. And the last thing we see is that Daniel acts directly against that by saying, you're trying to change my identity, not going to work. This is who I am. I am putting on my heart as Daniel that I will not defile myself. Really inspiring, cool story. And there's just a little bit of an insight into Daniel chapter 1.